Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Shauna coming to you once again from my home office with a special video today. This is talking earlier a while back about the books that we've been reading over this pandemic lifestyle that we've been in for the last month and a half. And she was asking me about how I choose the right book and why it's so hard for people sometimes to find the right book or to find a book that they love. And I think it's because a lot of times we've had bad experiences with books that maybe we couldn't relate to, or books that we were forced to read that we just weren't either interested in, ready for, or didn't speak to our circumstances. And I think that's really important. So, today, as a means of framing this discussion a bit, I'd like to use classics as a jumping off place for some of this discussion. You can use any category that you want, but I think classics are an intimidating category for many people. And I decided to use that. I have some links for you in the description also. So I think the first thing we need to consider is what do we mean by a category versus what do we mean by a genre. So think of it like a supermarket. A category is a specific type of item. So you go to the supermarket and you want to buy bread, let's say. Bread is your category. Well, they have wheat bread, they have white bread, they have sourdough bread, they have pumpernickel bread, they have crackers, they have banana bread, they have all kinds of bread. And all of those different kinds of bread are genres. Bread is the category. So I think the first thing that I would ask, and because I'm a firm believer that if you don't like to read or if you don't like a certain book, it's because you haven't found the right book. It's not that they're not out there. It's fine to say I haven't found the right book, but I don't think you should just swear off all books ever because you just haven't had a good experience with a book or an author or a genre. So I'm here to sort of frame some of that. And I think the one place to start is what category of book would you like to read? Now, there's different categories. There's fiction that are about things that are made up in general, but relatable to you. There's nonfiction, which is generally true stories. This could be a whole lot of little categories underneath that. And then there's classics. Classics is another category. There are more than those. But those are the three that I would like to take a stab and focus on. Um, and I'm not here to debate what makes a classic, how old does a book have to be a classic, who decides if it's a classic, what makes it a classic. As far as I'm concerned, um, if it speaks to you, if you get enjoyment out of it, read the book, enjoy it, get what you're supposed to from it, and move on. That's my philosophy about that. But I do recognize classics in general are intimidating and they can be very inaccessible at times to people. So I'd like to make some recommendations and give you some questions to think about when you're looking for the right book. Now, it really helps to know the category if you can. Do you have an idea if this were a smorgasbord or a buffet? Do you have an idea of the type of food you want to eat? Do you want to eat meat? Do you want to eat vegetables? Do you want to eat dessert? Have some sort of idea. Do you want to eat a little bit of everything? Have some sort of idea what you want to do in that particular moment. Um, and obviously, there are many reasons why people read, but I'm assuming that you're reading to pick up something that you actually want to read as opposed to something that you need to read for another particular reason. So, provided that you have a category, fiction, nonfiction, or even if you don't, ask yourself a couple of questions. One question I would ask is, how do I want to feel? How do I want the book to make me feel? Because books elicit moods. And so you can drive your selection by how you want the book to make you feel. And so, for example, if you are feeling kind of angry and upset and you want to vent and you want to have an opportunity to express some of that, then maybe what you need to do is read something like Lord of the Flies by William Golding. It's a dystopian novel about young prep school boys that get stranded on an island in the Pacific and they have to basically fend for themselves. Think Hunger Games before the dystopian starvation and the lack of technology. Um, if you're, or maybe you want to read about 1984, which has some chilling parallels to today's kind of totalitarian leaning society, 1984 by George Orwell. Um, if you want something that is maybe a character-driven story that focuses on a specific character, you can read a book like Stoner by John Williams. It's named for the title character, John Stoner, who is a professor. Um, or you can read the novella by Herman Melville called Bartleby the Scrivener. Herman Melville known for his huge tome Moby Dick, which I haven't read, by the way, but Herman Melville's short novella Bartleby the Scrivener will give you plenty to converse about and focus on. It's about a man who works as basically a clerk and a copyist, and he, at one point, he does very good work, and then he suddenly decides that his preferred um, sort of comeback to every request is, I would prefer not to. And there's all kinds of dynamics that are very subtle that go on with that. And there's lots of discussion points about what may or may not have happened to him. So it's an interesting character study. If you want um, like a subtle social commentary, you might read a book like, say, The Scarlet Letter by Nathaniel Hawthorne, which has to do with has themes of adultery and trust and a lot of public shaming. If you got into the sort of discourse recently, it's still going on to some extent about public shaming and the benefits or the detriments of that. Um, the uh, the Scarlet Letter gives you an early example and a glimpse of Puritan society where that was actually practiced. Um, Something like if you're interested in sort of something a little bit not quite as dark, but every bit as thought provoking and more faith based, you might consider a book like The Chosen by Chaim Potok, which deals with the lives of two Jewish boys and their relationship with one another and their fathers, one from an Orthodox Jewish background, the other from a Hasidic Jewish uh, background. A very interesting story there. Um, you might consider, if you want an adventure story or something that takes you to another world, A lot of people know about the Narnia books by C.S. Lewis. They're not as familiar with another trilogy called the Space Trilogy that he had, and I personally really like it. It's Out of the Silent Planet, That Hideous Strength, and Paralandra. Those books are thought provoking, but they take place in another world. Um, you might consider a book like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, which the movie Blade Runner was based on. The book Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick um, might give you something to think about with technology and where we might be headed with our use of technology and what might happen to our society. So, if you like nonfiction books um, or travel in nature, there's a lesser known work by John Steinbeck. Everybody knows travel of Mice and Men, The Grapes of Wrath, but some people don't know about a book called Travels with Charlie. In 1960, John Steinbeck uh, took what we would call an RV today across the United States, about 10,000 miles, um, up and down the coast. He started in New York, went through Texas, ended up in the West Coast, and then went back to New York. Um, and he called his RV, he called it Rocinante after the horse in Don Quixote. And he traveled with his poodle, Charlie, and that's where the title comes from. So you have a book like that. There's lots of other nonfiction books that you can consider also. One of my most affecting books, which is not a classic, but I'll throw it on this list, is a book called Left to Tell by a lady called Immaculée Ilibagiza. She was born and raised in Rwanda, survived the Rwandan genocide in the early 90s, and talks in that book about her experiences there as a member of the the majority tribe there, but she talks about relations between the Hutus, the Tutsis, and the Twa people. And you don't have to know a whole lot about the politics of that time to understand it because she explains it for you as the book goes along. And it's a very difficult read and it's very harrowing, but it's definitely worth your time. And I've told everybody that reads that book, regardless of what your stance is on God and faith, you'll never see God the same way again after you read that book. So I'm going to put some of these recommendations below. I hope that was helpful to you. I hope you get some food for thought from it. And I hope you enjoyed this video. As I said, I'm going to leave some links down in the description that will give you some books that you might want to check out. Classics focused, but not totally so. And I will chat with you later. Have a good day, everyone.